Hello and welcome to my channel. I don't always draw landscapes inspired by the weather conditions outside, but it has been very foggy these days, so I decided to go with this nice misty landscape. It's not a very complicated scene. We have some thick trees and bushes in the foreground and some light suggestions of trees in the back in the mist. And this was all done in charcoal. Now let's have a look. For my sketch I didn't really do much, just made a few suggestions with a graphite pencil where everything was going to be, because like I said, it's not a very complicated scene. And I almost immediately moved in with a charcoal pencil and started to draw these trees. Now, like I said, I want the trees and the bushes on the right, or on the left rather, to be rather thick, so I want a little bit more value there. It's going to be a somewhat imbalanced, asymmetrical drawing with some darker values and more contrast and detail on the left side, and with some blurry shapes on the right side, because I want that contrast between the trees in the foreground and the distant trees in the back. So as for the tools, like I said, I did a little bit of sketching with a graphite pencil at first, but then I moved on with my usual tools, which are woodless charcoal pencils. And here I'm also using tortillions, because when I do this scribbling to produce something that looks like leaves or canopies of trees, whether I'm drawing deciduous or coniferous trees, it doesn't really matter. I just scribble a little bit and try to imitate the appearance of either leaves or clusters of needles, and the appearance of the branches and canopies of the trees that I'm trying to draw. But the thing is that I always have to do a certain amount of blending in order to give those canopies more volume and more thickness and density. And also sometimes, as you can see here, I can do my drawing only with the tortillion if I want lighter value. But here, closer to the middle, I just made some lines, vertical lines, to suggest where my tree trunks will be, and over them and around them I will be drawing all this foliage and the bushes under them. So I'm trying to use short circular strokes and to make them from different directions, to avoid making it look too uniform and artificial. And also, as you can see, my woodless charcoal pencil is very sharp here. I occasionally just resharpen it because I like to have a nice tip when doing this tree work. If I feel like I need to fill in larger areas with more value, I can just grab a brush and spread that charcoal around a little bit to fill in these gaps, although eventually I will want to have some gaps because I want to make it look like light is coming through some of the branches and the trees. But here you can see the tortillions are my main tool for trying to create more density in those canopies. occasionally I just, like I said, use a brush and soften everything and maybe push the charcoal a little bit into the white of the paper, so that I don't have to go over everything with my pencil and cover everything. And now I'm using that charcoal on my brush to create those suggestions of trees in the back, and maybe going over the sky just a little bit. I just want a blurry, I want some blurry shapes there in the background, nothing special. Just a nice, simple, misty landscape. Out here I'm going to put some grass closer to the water, and since this is something like a lake, probably there's not going to be much detail in the water, and maybe just a few reflections, and that's about it. So most of my efforts will be focused on these trees and trying to make them look realistic and as detailed as possible. And as usual, I will use my usual tactics with charcoal pencils to create an illusion of detail in those trees and bushes, to make it look like I've really put in a lot of work, even though the whole scene probably took less than 2 hours to do, and I could have done it even faster probably. But it's not a very large drawing. I mean, this one is about 6 times 8 inches in size or so. The paper, in case you're wondering, in this case is a Fabriano sketching paper, but as I often say, the paper isn't really that important, especially when you're working with charcoal. So it doesn't really matter which brand of paper you pick up. I just generally tend to prefer paper that's thicker. This particular sketching paper is not very thick, but normally when I work with charcoal I tend to use thicker paper because it can take a lot more damage and abuse and blending, and I often like to press when working with charcoal, so I'm not a very patient or gentle person when drawing, so I tend to prefer thicker paper. So I'm gonna add some more trees here. Some of them are going to be bare, some of them are going to be smaller than others. So I like the way the light is already coming through some of the trees and branches, but I will be modifying the appearance of those a little bit more. Here, instead of drawing these tiny leaves and branches, I decided to dab a little bit of charcoal powder and dab it with my finger a little bit to try to see if I can produce some texture that kind of looks like distant branches and leaves, which are not very dense. But so far so good. I mean, I'm not really trying to copy or replicate my reference photo exactly. I'm just trying to capture the atmosphere and make it resemble the trees from a distance. That's about it. Need some more value here around the grass and the water here, and you can see that I made some very light reflections. I'm going to be adding a few more dry trees there, and I think they are a nice detail. And now I'm also adding some more detail to the tops of the trees, because I wasn't really happy with their appearance. Here you can see me using a pencil eraser to poke some holes in between those trees and canopies, because I want more light to be coming through the branches. So the key here, like I said, is trying to create this darker mass of trees and foliage in the foreground. And even though the drawing is asymmetrical, it can still be balanced, because the balance is between the area of darker value on one side and lighter value on the other side. And I'm kind of hoping to add some more additional balance with my signature once I'm done. But it's okay to have an asymmetrical drawing, and I think you'll see that it'll be a nice looking scene once I'm done. So here I added some details to the grass. Let's try to pull some blades of grass with my pencil eraser. And now I'm trying to do the same thing with these bushes in the foreground, trying to draw some of the leaves which are maybe receiving a little more light than others, and trying to create some variation to give those trees and bushes a little more shape and depth. I can also do that with a kneaded eraser, because the kneaded eraser lifts up the charcoal very nicely without smudging it. And I can also, if I want to make an entire area a little bit lighter, I can just dab. I can flatten my kneaded eraser and just dab a little bit so that it can take away a little bit of value from the whole area. But later I can go back in and maybe work on the details and adjust them according to my liking. I mean, I could have finished this drawing earlier, but at this point it's mostly just adjusting some of the smaller details, refining some of the details, till I can get these trees and bushes to look the way I like. And now I'm covering these corners which were secured with a tape. I can also go over the grass in the middle here a little bit with a brush to soften it a little bit and make it less defined than the one that is all the way on the left, which is closer to us. And the charcoal pencil always produces a lot of rough texture, so if I feel like I've removed too much texture from a certain area by blending, I could just go back in with a charcoal pencil and scribble over that area a little bit and produce some texture to create an illusion of detail. Here I decided to pull a few branches with my pencil eraser, just to make those bushes in the foreground a little bit more interesting, maybe adding a few highlights on the tree trunks as well, and a few more bushes here and there to break up that darker area, to give it more detail and make it a little more interesting. So here again I'm dabbing a little bit with my kneaded eraser to make some of the areas a little bit lighter, because I do want these bushes lower down to be a little bit lighter, as well as some of the parts of these canopies, so I'm kind of taking away a little bit of the value there, so that some of those branches kind of feel like they're protruding and getting more light. and so that these darker areas feel like they're deeper into the woods, like they're recessed and they're getting less light. So this contrast is needed to create an illusion of depth. And here and there I'm adding a little more detail by adding some more suggestions of tree trunks and maybe some bushes and stuff like that. And I'm going over those treetops with a black colored pencil, trying to add a little more detail there. Here the drawing is almost finished, but I decided that I don't really like this line here next to the water. I kind of want to make this water line a little bit more flat and even. So I'm using a brush for that, just kind of hoping that I can gently straighten it, and adding just a little bit of charcoal here and there, trying to make some of the areas in the water and the reflections a little bit darker so that they sort of roughly match what's above the surface, so that we get an idea of a water surface, so that we get an idea that there are some reflections there. So here it is. My signature and the drawing is finished. Please give me a like and subscribe to my channel and comment to let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to check out my other videos. Thanks for watching.